Okay, hello and welcome to the fourth installment of the Invisible Guitar. And today we're going to talk about how to get out of scale jail, okay? And how to get out of position playing. Some people even, I've heard them referred to as boxes or cells. Egad, I sure as hell don't want to be in a box. And I sure as hell don't want to be in a cell. And I sure as hell don't want to be in jail. So, when we practice, I was looking at some of these websites, these guitar instructional videos, they'll do stuff like this and show you a major scale. And then the intervals inside it. That's all fine and dandy, and, yes, you can play G major there in that box. However, the guitar, if you were to think about this, how was the guitar invented? Let's think about that. Well, I'll take a wild guess. Probably a long time ago, somewhere in India or somewhere in Africa, somebody tied a cat gut, poor cat, to a stick and went over to their buddy and said, "Hey man, check this out." Wow. What a concept, Maybe after a couple of days of doing that, his buddy was like, "Yeah, man, but you know what? What if you put two cat guts on there? Then you could have two sounds at the same time. Whoa, And then, maybe on day 3, they added another cat gut. And the village cats were probably getting the hell out of Dodge by that time, right? Until after 6 cats, maybe they couldn't find any more cats and they got stuck at where the guitar is. I don't know. But isn't that logical? And, when you see all these guys playing these boxes, I don't know. As you know, my background comes from the piano, and I used to have this bird. It was a cockatiel. His name was Prince. And he would sit on top of my piano in my room when I would play it. I used to play random pitches because I kind of just stumbled into this. A fact, we learn best when we don't know that we're learning. When you sit around with all these patterns and scales and things, you're really stuck into a pattern, and I think when you're trying to kind of get your ears wet and really trying to see what all the possibilities are, it's really good to just kind of randomly hit pitches, and I would do that and my bird would sing them, and we'd go back and forth, and it was a wonderful bird. When I moved away to go to North Texas, I sold him to this gentleman that came over. I was so happy to get that bird. Glad he got to go to a good home because I couldn't have pets in the dorms. I didn't have any choice. So that was a great lesson, though. And, a few years ago on the internet or something, somebody played me, Mike Stern was taking a guitar lesson from Pat Metheny. And Pat Metheny was extolling the virtues of, let's get out of this whole idea that there's a right or wrong note. We've got 12 possible notes. When you practice major minor scales, that's 7. You practice pentatonic, that's 5. You're not getting all the colors. The chromatic scale is what you need to be looking at. Chroma, from the Greek word, means all the colors, right? So for me, the great scale, the mother scale, is the chromatic scale. I'm interested in all those possibilities. So why would I train my ears to be locked into these, boxes? I'll give you an example. I'm going to play a C-sharp drone tone that I just found on YouTube. And I'm going to just start on my first string, the high E, and I'm going to play an E over the C-sharp, which would be a minor third. And you'll already start to hear how tension evolves and decreases with different notes. And there's no wrong or right note. I'll play all of them and prove it to you. Here goes. There's a little C-sharp right there we got going. So I'll start with the high E. Kind of cool. I like that one. There's a major third. That's a nice note if you really dig into it. Then you get to the octave, C-sharp, same note, flat 9. I can easily make any one of those notes work like a charm over C sharp. You just saw me do it. I think that's a more big picture way of really letting your ears become acclimated to all the possibilities. Chroma, all the possibilities. Chromatic. It's a big deal. And I encourage you to think about it that way. Now let's talk about major and minor scales. Another thing that I'm really big on is get away from the whole ideas that scales have endings and beginnings. It shouldn't be that way. You know, math doesn't work that way. If you look at a number line, there's 0, right? But you can also go -1, -2, -3. You go this other way. And you know, the guitar is somewhat of a limited instrument compared to the piano because it's 3.5 octaves. I grew up on a piano where I would imagine the notes even outside of the range of the piano, you know, because if you think about it that way, there's a lot more freedom. And, you know, just like I talked about in the other video, you know, over a G chord, I'm not going to play the note G. Why would I bring sand to the beach? The bass player's doing it. The rhythm guitar player's doing it, you know? So if you want to learn how to improvise, the best thing to do would be start on some other note and find one that you like and get comfortable with that. See, and then you're bringing color. And so let's talk about notes that you don't like as well. You know, that seem kind of, cacophony is a word we use for dissonance in music, or dissonance. Well, you know, like my buddy Alan Holdsworth used to say, get your face in the dirt and get a little dirty and find some funky things that, you know, might kind of sound weird at first, but if you really hang in there, you can find a way to build tension and then resolve tension. And that's what improvise is all about. And also in the word attention is the word tension. So to get comfortable with tension. You know, that's why people stop and look at car wrecks. You know, it's sad, but there's tension there. Hey, are those people okay? You know, people don't stop and look when somebody's picking up trash on the side of the road. So it's kind of a human nature thing too. But when we're talking about improvising, I want you to be an interesting person, you know, that brings color and brings something to the picture. So when we look at the major scale, one of the things I like to do is, instead of learning it, you know, and getting stuck in that little box, why not learn it on one string? And it's real easy. You know, our second class we spent on intervals, setting up the channels of communication. And now you know what a whole step is. And we know what a half step is. And I could teach you the recipe for almost any scale with just whole steps and half steps. A few things we're going to run into minor thirds with diminished scales and harmonic minor and stuff. But just like binary code, ones and zeros, you know, you can give the formula for just about any scale, and that way you don't have to memorize it. You just familiarize yourself with it. That's where we want to go. So let's do a major scale on one string just to see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to play the open string. Have I done anything yet? No. That's just one. Like the drone background. Okay? Then you go a whole step, another whole step, a half step, 2.5, then 3 more whole steps, and then half step. 2.5 plus 3.5 completes the octave. And you might say to yourself, well, Eric, why would you only use one finger to play the major scale? You got all these other fingers. That's a great question. You know what I did in my early days? I would try with different fingers. Then I'd do my third finger. Then I would do it with my pinky. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, that's not all I did. I also did it with my first 2 fingers. Then I would do it with my second and third finger. Then I would do it with my third and fourth finger. And then I would do it with my first and third finger. I really like that one. That one works out great. And I would do it with my first and fourth finger. And say, well, why would you do that, Eric? I'll tell you why. You think different. If I start here with my first finger, and I've got these 3 fingers over here, I'm probably going to go this direction. Because that's what's over there. I'm going to do something over there. But what if I started on my second finger? Now I've got one back here, so I might think to go in that direction. And if I started with my third finger, now I got 2 fingers over here. My third finger's here, so who knows what I'm going to come up with, right? And if I start on my 4th finger, then I got 3 guys over here, so I'm probably going to go. Or whatever. So you see, just by using a different digit, I was able to get out of sight of the box. So what it's all about, I have no interest in being, a patternistic player. I can hear it in people's playing, and it bores me to stiff. I'm looking more for the melodic framework that's coming from being in the moment and really listening to what's in your heart and what you're hearing in your head. And these things can really develop well over time. That's one of the big goals. So now you can see the advantage of playing on one string too is that the note never dies. And like a horn player, there's wind behind your sails. I really liked Jimi Hendrix when I first started out. And I noticed he played a lot east-west. He was a real outside-the-box guy. And when I learned the solo for Purple Haze, it was like. A lot of that east-west kind of playing. And it just made sense to me. It made complete sense to me. And I developed that as part of my style and where I was going to get into with all of this and everything. So another thing to look at is if you think about the major scale, we're going to get into this when we get into modes. There's no reason to learn all these different fingerings for Phrygian and Mixolydian and Locrian and all this other stuff because all of the scales come from the mother scale, the major scale. All a mode is a derivative. There's 7 possible modes because there's 7 notes. So the first degree of the major scale, would be called Ionian mode, right? And the second degree of the major scale is called Dorian mode. So I'm going to show you a system that I use. I know Frank Gambale uses it because I learned it from him when I was a kid, the way he looks at modes. You talk about a guy that can improvise. I was way more interested in what he was doing, when I saw that. And I already thought that way anyway because of my background in piano. And you're going to see it's a lot of freedom and not going around having all these fingerings for everything. There's some wisdom to that, for executing really rapid passages and doing all that and everything. But even the high-level players, think about this. Alan Holdsworth, how are you going to improvise better than that guy? Dear friend of mine, and he told me one time, he says, the only choice I make when I start a solo is the first note. After that, who knows? That's what I'm talking about. Freedom. That's freedom. It's a beautiful thing. And, you listen to players like Sonny Rollins, you hear a lot of that. And like I mentioned earlier, Pat Metheny, you hear a lot of that. Sometimes just they're composing. Every time they play, it's like they're writing a new chapter in music. That's what I aspire to, and I want that for you too. It's freedom. That's what improvising is about. And also, by improvising, you improve. The word's in there too, you see? So we have a lot of things to think about here. And just remember, for you guys just kind of starting out, I highly recommend doing the major scale on one string for a while because you can see the intervals and you don't get caught up in the fingering. You can see the whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And when you go backwards, it's very important to do that. Half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. Then you're off the guitar. And by not thinking of scales as having beginnings or endings, that's how we're going to get into the modes, And there's baritone guitars that go out farther and stuff like that too, So you can trust that you're going to hear outside of the conventional range of whatever your instrument is and really start to see the big picture. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so some books that would help with this a lot. Chord Chemistry by Ted Green. Wonderful, wonderful book. Ted completely thought outside of the box. It's great stuff in there. Both of his single note jazz guitar soloing, volume 1 and 2 are great. Also, if you can find, I don't know if it's out of print, but Mick Goodrick, The Advancing Guitarist, that's a great book that has a lot of thinking outside of the box. And there's we're going to learn next class, we're going to talk about minor scales that are derivatives of major scales. Basically, if you go to the 6th step of a major scale, you find what the relative minor is. Or you can go 3 back. So in the case of E major, the relative minor would be C sharp minor. And if somebody played an E major chord, I would be very likely to hit a C sharp note before I would an E. I wouldn't bring sand to the beach because I trained myself that way. See, here's something you can learn. I learned this from my firearms instructor, Mark Wamick, really smart guy. In your training, you don't rise to the level of the occasion. You know, you hear that, that's cute and everything, but that's not what happens. You fall to the level of your training. Okay? So you're not going to do some mind-blowing solo because, you know, you just got lucky. I mean, that can happen, but it's much more likely to be consistently able to do that from your training. Then when you get into a situation, you're going to fall to your level of training, you know, and that's why I train that way with my ears. And another thing that you can learn, like we were talking about earlier, these supposedly wrong notes or bad notes can be really exciting things, you know. There's a great attorney down in Houston that has a philosophy. It's called Embrace the Ugly Baby. I like to do that. You know, a flat 9 used to sound really kind of dissonant to me when I would hear it against a chord. But now it's one of the, is a hallmark of my style. I love that sound. And so that's another thing that happens from this drone training, you know. There's a joke that you might listen to that will help with this kind of thinking. A yogi walks into a pizza bar in New York and he says, "Make me one with everything." So that's the one. Let's train that way for a while. Just on one note. And then we'll move around to other keys, and the freedom of this is so powerful. And you can get outside of the box and the cell and the pattern and the position playing and all those cages. I even saw some book that calls them cages. Who wants to be in a cage? Just this kind of stuff you can see I'm passionate about and everything. But it's because I want to share with you the success that all my students have had, and I'll have them do some videos for you just to see. I'm really proud of what some of the guys that have studied with me do, because we think outside the box. That's the way to do it. You know, change always comes from outside. It doesn't come from within the community. And you look at the guys that have really changed the guitar community, they were a little bit outside the box. You know, the Frank Zappas and the Alan Holdsworth and the Pat Metheny's and the kind of guys that, you know, oh man, and don't even get me started in the jazz world, you know, in the classical music world where that stuff happens. So this is beautiful. I want you to learn how to be a little avant-garde for a while. Here's another good joke before we go today. The great Beatle, George Harrison, somebody played him some avant-garde music one time, and he said, "It sounds like they avant-garde a clue." But it's cool to be a little out there, a little weird sometimes, okay? So that was the whole lesson today. Now subscribe to my channel on YouTube, because I'm going to do a few more of these, and then I'm going to, you know, get into building up a little bit more of a base for this, so because I'm going to get back and start playing and touring and get my new video out. But I really enjoy helping you guys while I'm home taking care of my dad and doing all this stuff. And go forth today and get your ears a little dirty, okay? And get outside the boxes, the cages, all those things. You don't want any part of that stuff. Okay, see you tomorrow.